Well, I think I got enough goofy stuff for the intro.
Yeah, please edit out some of that.
Oh, no, I'm going to include your story complete with F word, and so that we have to have an explicit language advisory.
You know what? If we did that, our people viewing it would go up by probably 20-30%.
It probably, maybe I could put like a beep in there.
Yeah, no, please don't let that one go through.
Okay, I won't.
Welcome to the Three Wise Men of Divorce, Money, Psych, and Law podcast. Sit down with the California divorce experts, financial divorce consultant Mark Hill, psychologist Scott Weiner, and attorney Shawn Weber for a frank and casual conversation about divorce, separation, co-parenting, and the difficult decisions real people like you face during these tough times. We know that if you are looking at divorce or separation, it can be scary and overwhelming. With combined experience of over 70 years in divorce and conflict management, we are here for you and look forward to helping by sharing our unique ideas, thoughts, and perspectives on divorce, separation, and co-parenting.
Okay, so you've probably had this case come up, guys, right? Where there's a divorcing couple and one party has left the other party. You have a leavee and a leavor, and they've left the other party for a new person. And for some reason, the person that got left is not happy about that. Have you ever encountered that kind of a fact pattern?
It does happen.
Where the person that is left is unhappy about being left for another prettier, more handsome person?
Does it ever not happen?
It's a very common fact pattern, right?
Yeah.
But this happens a lot too, as the person that left is very confused as to why the person that is being left is unhappy and says, and I quote, "Why can't you be happy for me?"
It's so hilarious. Why? Yeah. So somebody, in current times when there's this huge divide between the 1% and the 99% of the others, I'm imagining a 1%er walking by some rather hungry, disheveled-looking homeless person saying, "Why can't you be happy for me?
Yeah.
Why can't you be?"
I worked hard for this.
Well, or I didn't.
At your expense, but I did it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Why can't you be happy for me?
And they really mean it too. I mean, they're really confused as to why the person that you stepped out on and are now divorcing, why that person is not just thrilled for you.
Are they really? Are they really that confused, or are they just wishing kind of a free pass to enjoy their good fortune after the fact? I mean, are they actually their behavior does often bespeak a kind of confusion. Why can't you be happy for me? Yeah. There's a difference between sincere and rhetorical questions. People say those things. They say, "Why can't you be happy for me?" And I was saying that that's not really even an honest question most times from a communications point of view. When I say, "Well, why doesn't that guy do this or that or the other?" I'm really not asking, why doesn't he? It's a rhetorical statement. I am urging that he should do it. When you say, "Why can't they be happy for me?" I'm saying you should be happy for me, and I want you to be happy for me, and I don't want the conflict that comes from feeling the reasonable guilt of having dumped my other for this, new Tesla model that just came along.
I think you're generally right, but I have seen genuine puzzlement on about two or three occasions in my career where I just think they couldn't see anything but their own perception. They couldn't put themselves in the place of anybody but them.
But you did already pose the theory to cover that, or Shawn did, which is narcissism with a small n is a healthy component of all of us. You have to have some sort of take care of yourself, be good to yourself, or you won't be any good for anything. But when we cross a line and we become completely ignorant of how other people might, I don't know.
Well, people get blinders on, don't they? So they kind of get into their, I think of blinders like on a horse where you can only see what's in front of you. And not really being aware of what's going on around you as you're forging ahead. And here's this person, let's say it's a guy, and he's got the new honey, and she makes him feel really good, and she's good in bed, and he feels alive. Maybe he had a midlife crisis.
Did you say midwife or midlife?
I think it came out midwife. Yeah,
you did.
Midlife crisis. And he feels loved, and he feels sexy for the first time in years. And so he's so focused on how good he feels and how wonderful this experience is that there's just an assumption that everybody must feel wonderful about him having this experience too, including the person he's leaving.
Do you really find that believable that he actually believes that? I mean, Mark says that once or twice in his experience, he's seen that occur, and I believe that. Yeah,
I've seen it happen. Yeah,
it's why can't now let's alter the story a little bit. Let's go. What's a good period of time? 7 or 8 years down the line, when everybody's had a chance for this divorce to essentially
the dust is settled after the affair.
Yeah, it's shaked out, and it's almost like maybe they have kids, they meet and they have coffee from time to time to talk about,
is he still with the mistress, or is
our son Freddy Krueger has stopped terrorizing the the kids in school, and our other boy Chucky is behaving much better. We let him around the kitchen knives now, and by the way, I have a new lady love, and she returns to that jealousy and stuff like that and all that, or angry. And then he might reasonably say, can't you be happy for me? I mean, we're down the line now.
We're down the line. This right. Didn't happen during the marriage, you're saying. This happened 7 years after the marriage ended.
Right, yeah, right. That seems more understandable and reasonable.
Right.
Especially because there may have been relationships that the other spouses had during that period.
Well, and I will say this, if I'm going to have a problem on a case, especially when there's kids involved post-judgment, it's going to be when the new significant other shows up. And you're amazed. I mean, even the person that asked for the divorce, like I had a case like this, she asked for the divorce.
I think I know it.
You know the one we're talking about. She asked for the divorce, and he, sometime after the divorce was final, has a new person. And then she has an absolute cow over it that he's with a new person, becomes incredibly jealous. And that always kind of puzzled me. You wanted this, he's finally moving on, and now you're angry. So that happens too. And I feel like we're picking on women. I mean, this happens in both directions, right? It's not gender specific. I've seen women have affairs or have new significant others, and the men get jealous.
Absolutely.
And I've seen the argument made on behalf of the person that's saying, why can't you be happy for me? Look, you've been miserable for years. I've heard from you for years how miserable you've been. I'm giving you the opportunity to find what I have found.
Oh, I had that one a couple of weeks ago. The wife is the one that had the new relationship. And she said, I thought you would be glad that I left.
Yeah.
You weren't happy during the marriage. You made that very clear to me throughout the marriage that you were unhappy. And now I'm with a new person and you're angry at me about it. Well, what causes that? Why would a person be angry when they were miserable the whole marriage?
Well, we're assuming that the only dimension of wanting loyalty and this, that, and the other is this affiliative connection. There are other dimensions. There's there's other reasons that we can be jealous. A lot of times the dynamics of these relationships are, it sounds so canned to say it, but it's almost reflective of family of origin. It's almost like I see a lot of couples issues as being almost brother and sister rages that go on. Who's more worthy? Who's more deserving of the respect of others? Who's this? Who's that? Who's the other? And it's sort of like it's like a pecking order thing. You want to get biblical about it? Go ahead, Jacob and Esau. Get going. It's sort of like, this is old stuff. This is so core for us, these old jealousies, that they're reflected in all the religious writings. It's all there.
Mother liked you more than me.
Well, yeah, then there's that one too,
But there's that one often with the in-laws too. Sometimes you get an in-law who really likes the son-in-law or the daughter-in-law.
Oh, yeah.
And that creates problems for the other spouse.
Oh my God. Oh my God. And you don't even need a divorce for that one.
That's true. But it'll probably cause one.
Well, I mean, I stayed with you because I like your mother,
I think there's a country song that sort of talks, I won't miss her, but I'll miss her dad.
Oh, that's so fun. Well,
it's like that Jim Reeves song, She Took the House and Left. It was a mobile home.
Okay.
Well, there's a need, isn't there? There's an emotional need that is not being met when a person strays. I'm not trying to defend the adulterer, right? But these things don't happen in a vacuum. Would you agree with that? Or am I?
I would agree with that, but not with the idea that there are emotional needs that we have of each other that are fair to ask. And then there's dependency needs that are too powerful to be met by, just some other person. And then the straying can be as much for, straying isn't always wholesome. Okay. Straying is not always, there was just this reasonable need that I wasn't. Yeah. It can be for crazy unmet dependency needs too.
I think most people would say that straying is definitely not wholesome.
Well, yeah. But you're talking about, there's a need that's not being met. Yeah.
But there's serial strayers.
Not all needs are created equal. Shall we say that?
I think there are people who essentially that is their go-to default position. If I'm not getting what I want, I will stray. And there are people who do that. And then there are others, I think, who genuinely fall into a relationship at a time when they don't, they weren't necessarily seeking it. I think there's different shades of gray on this spectrum here.
There's a lot of gray. I
maybe about 50.
What's that?
50 shades of
50
gray.
shades. You would know better than I, counselor.
I don't know
shades there
are. Psychologists and all your sex talk.
We're all I don't know whether our voyeurism or our hypocrisy is more remarkable. It's hard for me to tell.
Well, that's what we have you here for, to make those kind of decisions on.
Yeah, I see. Well, I've said before that I think that sometimes we're paid professional hypocrites, but okay, all right. So yes, there's some kind of, some kind of tropism, some kind of turning toward an experience that a person wants. Yes, that is a valueless assertion. However, it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm not here trying to argue that you're justified when you stray. I'm just saying there's a reason why people stray that could be explored, and it could help to understand it. I had a case, I think I've mentioned this case before on this podcast, where the woman always looked like She'd swallowed a lemon. She was very angry because he had an affair. And she always referred to the mistress throughout the proceeding. The mistress that, the mistress this. And he would come back and he would say, well, divorce doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's a reason why I left. It's because you were a cold, horrible person to be around. You never met my needs. You wouldn't sleep with me. You were always cruel to me. And so I left. And her response was, well, you know what? I would have rather you just left and then gotten with your mistress. Why did you have to get with your mistress while you were married to me? That would have been much more, be a man is what she said. You should have been
you shouldn't have been hedging your bets.
Exactly. And so that was, and I know I'm getting into kind of a moralistic argument here, but I mean, my point in bringing it all up is there were two very clear points of view and a lot of hurt going on.
And let me take this back up to, 30,000 feet and say, how did that impact the process of the divorce, and how much more difficult was it? And because I do recall you talking about this space, and there was some resolution that occurred, but getting that resolution at an earlier stage in the case, I would have suspected would have made it smoother.
Yes. I mean, she was very angry. And Scott, I think you've told me this, that anger is a secondary emotion, right?
Well, I say that's one of the conventional theories. Yes.
Yeah.
And but that at least in many cases, I've seen it be true.
She was very wounded.
Yes.
She was very wounded. She was very hurt. She was angry at him. She didn't want to cooperate with him in co-parenting. And so I think the kids were going to suffer because of that. She wanted him to pay. She wanted him to have to suffer for what he did.
Retribution.
And the problem is we're in California, which is a no-fault state. And, I've told people, when I used to do litigation, I used to say, he could go out and sleep with every Chargers cheerleader. That's back when the Chargers were still in San Diego, with every Chargers cheerleader, a different one every night, and the court wouldn't care. And because people are looking for some kind of retribution, some kind of justice for what he did to me or what she did to me. And that's not available legally. So then I had to explore with that family as the mediator. Could she have, in essence, an opportunity to clarify what he did and what that meant to her and what pain that caused her? Could that be expressed in a way that would then allow them to be able to go on to settlement? And that's what we did. We gave her that forum, and then they got to settlement.
Well, the great thing about that is they actually came into mediation, because many people who are that angry just want the retribution of the gladiator attorney going out and fighting the good fight on their behalf.
And credit to both of them that they made that
they actually came into mediation. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of emotionality going on there. And I got to give her credit. She was very angry and was very challenging at the beginning of the case, but then she got to a place where she was quite reasonable. And if anything, he became more problematic.
Excuse me, but I got to give credit to the mediator. The fact that you installed that process for them and saw that as a potential window through which they could perhaps pass and get to another level of settlement. I mean, I'm not wearing a hat, but if I had one, I'd take it off to you.
But let's compare what would have happened in a litigated case. In that case, you would have had the ability of a talented attorney. I think I've told this story before, but a colleague of mine from San Francisco who started with a big firm many, many, many years ago, she told me that they had a partner who specialized in jilted women as clients. And his comment to the woman was, and he would repeat it in pretty much every case, then we will rip out his lying heart. And that was exactly the phrase he would use in order to gather clients essentially and go through a litigious process to try to get that retribution you were talking about.
I had a former business partner. She was an old school litigator, and she would tell people, we're going to get his left testicle on a silver plate.
I got to ask a question. In a common law state, can you get retribution for...
Well, there are some states that are still where fault is still an element, and it can affect outcomes. Like I think,
but not in California.
But not in California. But there are some states. There are some states where fault is an element.
I think Georgia was one of them.
Yeah, and there's been a big debate as to whether pulling fault out of divorce proceedings was actually positive. Because what happens now is you go to court. Yeah, the judge doesn't have to thread the needle and figure out who caused this marriage.
Yeah.
But what you have then is you have no processing happening. So then anybody brings up affairs, then the litigating attorney stands up, objection, relevance.
Yeah.
Because whether he had an affair is not relevant, or she had an affair. You can bring affairs into California proceedings through the breach of fiduciary duty argument, though.
And through the way money was spent.
Correct. So he spent money on her $30,000 tennis bracelet, for the mistress. Now we've got an issue that is relevant, and you can bring it into the story. But
just because he chose to go out with her the night of their anniversary, that's not going to have any difference to the case.
The fact that he had a lying, cheating heart that we're going to pull out doesn't matter.
And the adjustment in property for that $30,000 tennis bracelet is $15,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, unless he defrauded her, you see.
In which case it could be 30.
It could be 30. Yeah, it depends on what his behavior was like. If he came clean, then okay, then we'll make those adjustments.
I see. So there can be a disgorgement term there if there's fraud, fiduciary fraud.
Yeah, or I also had the case where this was early in my career, and the husband. These poor men. It's always the men I'm picking on, but it usually is.
Let's face it. Come on.
I mean, sometimes it's the women, but he had cleaned out their 401k and had spent it on lap dances and pornography. That's a lot of porn.
Or a really tiny 401k.
It was a whole lot of money he was pulling out. It was six figures.
Wow.
And judge said that was not a breach of fiduciary duty. He had a right to do that. That was just, that benefited the community.
Wow.
Which community was he speaking of?
I don't know.
I think I have a hunch.
I was dumbfounded when that was going on. And I use that as my example of you never know what a judge is going to do.
I had a case years ago where husband had chosen to invest in a business for the mistress or the new girlfriend and didn't come clean to wife about it.
Yeah.
That was considered an abuse of fiduciary duty,
You see a lot of these guys
because
crying.
Actually the business did really well, but she wasn't going to benefit from it, because he had used separate property funds for it. It was very complicated, but it was an interesting case because as I found out a long time after I was involved with it, the judge actually did side with the wife's position. That she had been excluded from an investment opportunity, and just because it was with the girlfriend, she should have had the opportunity to participate in it. So he ended up writing her a check, I think, for like $50,000 or something. So
yeah, we see that, or we get a lot of these people. They're crying fat. They're crying poor. I'm poor. I don't have any money while they're driving around in their girlfriend's Maserati.
Yes, right. Yeah.
It's not their girlfriend's Maserati. It's their Maserati, but they put it in their girlfriend's name so they could hide it.
But there are always paper trails.
I will say this to people that try that kind of garbage. You always get caught. It's not something that's really smart to try to play those games, because the forensic accountants that have seen every trick in the book can spot these things pretty quickly. There's not any trick that you can dream up that they haven't already seen.
Yeah.
So when I'm going to ask my wife, and I'm driving my mistress's Maserati around, and I'm going to ask her, why aren't you happy for me?
Why are you happy?
Don't you get to ride in the Maserati every now and then?
Why are you being so selfish? Why can't you just let me be happy?
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. So, okay. Well, what's the moral of the story? We've been talking around this issue, and what can we learn from this?
I think there's one
Folks
thing
out
we've
there
learned
listening.
is that unresolved issues around hurt and anger will make the divorce case more expensive, more painful, and take longer. I think that, so if there's a way to get past that, not to necessarily forgive, but to be heard and to be acknowledged that your position has been heard, that often goes a long way. You don't necessarily get resolution. We're not talking about marital therapy to get them back together.
No.
But being able to address, I think where we, in our approach, when we do things outside of court, giving people a forum where, even though legally it may not be relevant, letting people address it to some extent can allow for a pathway to settlement, can give people an environment where the case can settle. Because if people are just kind of just filled with anger and rage and pain and hurt and all of that, it makes it very hard for folks to think clearly enough to be able to reach a settlement, because it's always clouded by, I can't believe I have to share with this person that did me so wrong.
And I think that's the concept of settlement readiness. There comes a point when we have all the financial information we need. So financially, we may be settlement ready, but nonetheless, unless they're emotionally ready to end their battle, and that's often what it comes down to, they're not going to complete the case in a satisfactory way. So I think getting people to that point, and I think the takeaway is, if there is anger in your case that's spilling over into your negotiations, we would encourage you to be engaging a mental health professional or two to help you through that part of it, because it's the most cost-effective way of getting your case done.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, not engage a mental health professional because we think you're crazy. What we're saying is engage a mental health professional so you can get a grasp on this emotionality that is infecting the ability for you to make clear, logical choices.
And to be able to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
It's really about, I always think about the coaches being communication specialists. No marriage breaks down unless there's been some degree of communication failure.
Well, there was the Truth and Reconciliation Committee in South Africa, next to the great Nelson Mandela. And there was a lot of hurt that went on in South Africa through apartheid. And the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, the whole point of it was to be able to speak truth and to be able to tell your story. And
without the anticipation for retribution.
Correct. Just
that's
get
the
it
big
out.
Key to it.
Tell your story. How were you hurt? The person that was the victim. What did you do? The person that caused the pain. And that did a lot to heal that country. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. And they use a lot of the same, they did a lot of the same thing in Rwanda, where there was a lot of pain. They did it also in Northern Ireland, and found that people able to tell their story and process it made it possible for people to reconcile something.
These are some of the most positive, political events of my lifetime that you're talking about.
Positive political events that were preceded by some of the most negative political events in our history.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Well, you're talking civil wars, basically.
Yeah, Rwanda, where people watched their
massacres
butchered.
Massacres.
Yeah,
these are massacres.
They watched their parents butchered, but being able to process what happened, what was the story that led to that pain and that horror, enabled people to be able to find peace. And peace, by the way, is not the absence of being done wrong, is it?
No.
Peace is being able to live with the pain that you had and the story that you had, and being able to move forward in a way that does less harm.
It's to move on, to be able to move on at all.
Well, what is that old saying? I don't know who said this, but holding a grudge is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But I think we as practitioners have to be very careful, and I've been guilty of this because we're in a no-fault state, minimizing the activity that caused the pain. Oh, well, that's nothing. It's not relevant. We can't talk about that. But the person that is feeling that pain is nevertheless feeling that pain, whether I think it's relevant or not.
But
yes,
when those issues are coming up in the context of, say, work we're doing, you and I, Shawn, we have to step outside, if we're co-mediating a case, our core competency in order to be able to do this. I think you and I both developed skills that enable us to be effective in some cases, but there are cases where it's beyond our pay grade, frankly. And that's when we need someone who is trained.
I got to say, you guys are some of the best I have ever seen. Unbelievably. I mean, we had a meeting just the other day where I felt free, and I think I made a mistake. But where I felt so comfortable with you guys and how you were managing things that in order to save a client some money, I said, you know what? You don't need me for the rest of this one. Now, as it turns out, I was wrong, but
you were definitely needed. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think so. I think,
I think, Mark and I think you and I would agree, Mark, that there's a point where, we act like therapists sometimes, but we're not. And we know where that line is. And I'm very happy to bring in a mental health professional to help with some of these really complex issues. Because sometimes I may see there's the problem, but I may not know what the remedy is, or I may not know what will help a person get past stuck.
Yes. Yep.
I think you do very, very well at actually remedy imagining. I think you do really well at that. You may not believe there's a lot of time in some of the cases we've worked on together where, oh man, it wouldn't have mattered a bit what I did.
Well, I admit freely that I'm good at what I do.
Okay, but I mean, and I think I admit freely that, and I guess I admit for all of us that our powers are not endless.
And sometimes I just cannot connect perhaps with a client in a way that Shawn can. And so it's helpful to have a team approach. Sometimes a client candidly will push my buttons and I'll find them difficult to interact with. And I will literally say to Shawn, I need help with this man or this lady. I'm not getting a connection. And that can happen to any one of us, is that we've got someone that just doesn't quite fit our parameter of the perfect client.
What happens when, Shawn, when you and I say to each other, no, you take it. No, you take it.
Heck if I know, Scott. I don't know what to
do. What makes you think,
I did once say to clients, I took the husband out of the room and I took him into the small conference room and I said, well, you've done it. He said, what? I said, you've stumped the mediator. I am out of ideas. I've got nothing left. And then I threw the line out. One thing we didn't try is generosity. What if you offered something that you're willing to give up and see what happens? And that actually did break the logjam. But I literally felt like I got nothing left here.
Well, there are moments like that where you're like, oh, this is never going to settle. And then all of a sudden they pull a rabbit out of the hat and they settle.
And sometimes just laying down that reality is that I don't know what to do next here. And I've got some experience. So you're going to have to come up with something, because the whole point of collaborative or mediation is that the clients have a role and a responsibility. It's not just about us.
I've had cases where I wanted to histrionically walk out of the room.
Well, you hit a table once pretty hard.
I did slam a table pretty hard one time. I I have had cases where, okay, I'm done. I'm not working with you people anymore. I'm leaving the room. And then they beg me to come back and then they settle the case.
Really?
So, I mean, that happens,
Yep.
and the thing is recognizing that we're also human, and if you're out there listening to this and you're working with a professional, just realize they've got human reactions too. We have egos that can be bruised, and we try to keep our egos out of it, but it does happen. Yeah. Well, I think we've burned through another episode.
Probably. God, burning is right.
Time flies when you're having fun. We talked about a lot of good stuff here, but this is these deep emotional needs, these deep emotional pains really are what make divorce law, matrimonial law interesting for the professionals and challenging for the people that are going through it. And it's important to cut yourself some slack. And if you need the help of a mental health professional, by all means, and doesn't mean you have to do therapy. You can just get a good coach who can just kind of help you know what to do when you have to sit across the table from this person that is causing you so much distress.
And I have seen clients learn techniques that they felt uncomfortable with to start with. That seems like a contrivance. And then they try it and find that it's actually quite effective. And they often will change their approach based upon that. Yeah. My Lord, it worked.
Yeah. If it saves feelings, it saves pain. It gets you to the other side of a difficult, issue.
Yep.
It's very gratifying. It's very gratifying. I think that this work is some of the hard and most conflict-laden work that I've done in my life, actually, doing this divorce coaching.
When I train people in the collaborative model, Scott, I always said, this is the hardest work you will ever love.
Yeah, I do.
And that's how I feel about it.
I do love it.
Well, there are those moments, and this is what gets my juices pumping, is there's those moments where a change occurs. Yeah. There's a transformation in the relationship. Yeah, maybe we aren't able to save the marriage. The marriage they're getting divorced for a reason, but they're able to get to a place where they can agree on something and move on and not have the same anger and pain. And
I can think of two cases I was involved in this year where I literally said and thanked the clients and said, that was beautiful. You both gave, you both contributed, and you came up with a solution. Twice this year, which is pretty good odds.
Yeah, we've been involved in a couple of cases like that, Mark.
Yeah.
There are some cases that I say a happy ending on a divorce case is when you can leave the marriage without feeling hatred and anger and pain, and you can see a future.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always happen in every case. Sometimes people just feel just tremendous despair and it takes a while, but sometimes it does.
How come you guys only bring me in on the ones where all the hatred is?
Because we need you.
I'm teasing.
We need you on those tough ones because
oh my God,
we've gotten beyond our pay grade. We need a psychiatrist.
Really? We explained this earlier if you were paying attention.
I wasn't on the call yet.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. This was a pleasure to do. I enjoyed this one.
It's great to be with you guys.
Yeah.
You guys are
Scott.
You guys are some of my favorite difficult people.
Oh, I strive to be difficult whenever I can. So, Scott, if they needed to get a hold of you to help work through anger and pain, what would they do?
Well, they'd have to call me on the telephone. And as Mark was teasing me earlier, and you regularly do, my primitive connection to the universe is merely by cell phone. I am not a web entity. Oh, I'm so behind it. Hey, you guys, I sound young on the podcast, but I am a geezer. Give me that.
I would agree
on the phone.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, well.
What's the phone number?
They would call me 619, the old San Diego registry, 619-417-5743. And as Mark teased me about earlier, yes, I do answer my own phone. And I am a clinical psychologist. I'm also a lawyer. I'm inactive in the bar, but I am law trained, so I'm in some ways a rather useful coach to folks who are going through some of these things.
I would agree with
Scott
that.
Weiner.
Mark, if someone needed to talk to you about the financial side of things, what would they need to do?
Well, I don't think we even have telephones anymore. So no, I'm kidding. But we do have a website. It's called packdivorce.com. I'm a certified financial planner, certified divorce financial analyst. We have a contact form on there and our phone number. If you have a question related to divorce and finances, I'd be happy to hear from you.
Spell it out for them, Mark.
PACDivorce, PACDIVORCE.com.
Could I fax you something?
You know, I think I do have a fax number, but I have no idea what it is.
I haven't used it. I took my fax line out.
Yeah.
Do you guys e-fax, don't you?
Yeah, you can do it.
We have something, but I don't think anyone's used it in about 5 years. Sean, what about
the
you?
Victrola.
If you need to solve a dispute and you need a dispute resolver, go to weberdisputeresolution.com and we will connect you with a dispute resolution expert who can help you solve your case.
Spell Weber.
Weber, like the grill with one B, weberdisputeresolution.com. All right, guys. Good talk.
Nice to see you all.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Three Wise Men of Divorce: Money, Psych, and Law. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share with others who may be in a similar place. Until next time, stay safe, healthy, and focused on a positive, bright future. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Every family law case is unique, so no legal, financial, or mental health advice is intended during this podcast. If you need help with your specific situation, feel free to schedule a time to speak with one of us for a personal consultation.